about the enigmatic personality of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee and the kind of prudent decisions which he took as the Prime Minister of India. And we'll get to hear it from the mouth of our chief guest for today, Mr. Shakti Sinha ji. To give you a more elaborate introduction of Shakti Sinha ji, I would like to invite Shobhit ji onto the stage. So Shobhit ji holds a BTech in Computer Science and Engineering from IIT Bombay. He also completed his MS Computer Science and Engineering from the University of Washington in 2006. After serving Amazon.com as a database engineer in Seattle, he started his venture Youth for Seva to connect youth for their participation in nation building. He later started Vision India Foundation, which after 5 years has transformed into Rashtra School of Public Leadership, with Shobhit ji serving as its founding dean. I would request Shobhit ji to please come onto the podium and help me start with the session. Please, sir.
Thank you, Ketan. Namaste. Good evening to everyone. Privileged to introduce Shakti Sinha ji, known him for quite a few years now. Shakti ji is a former IAS officer and is a distinguished fellow at the India Foundation. He has been instrumental in setting up two institutions. One, a think tank, Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute of Policy Research and International Studies at the MS University in Baroda, and of which he is the honorary director. And another, an academic institute of excellence, the Delhi School of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Delhi. He was also the director of the prestigious Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, and has also served as a joint secretary in the Prime Minister's office in the past. We are here because Shakti ji has worked closely with the former Prime Minister, Bharat Ratna Atal Bihari Vajpayee during 1996 to 1999. He first got to know Vajpayee ji in 1980 and worked with him extensively in the 1990s, first as secretary to the leader of the opposition between 96 and 97, and then as his private secretary between 98 and 99. Today we have all assembled here to discuss his book Vajpayee, The Years That Changed India. Let us hear from Shakti ji regarding the understanding of Vajpayee ji and how he impacted India's politics and policy making. Along, there's another organization here that is the Roundtable of India. And I would request some of their members to come forward who are present here and felicitate Shakti ji. But before that, a quick introduction. A very interesting thing that I came to know about the organization is that you take members only between the age of 18 to 40. The aim is to promote young people into service, fellowship, and goodwill in national and international affairs. Roundtable India, the association, was formed in 1962 with just a membership of 100 and has now become 4,600 strong members across the globe with 300 chapters in 124 cities and young leaders from business, entrepreneurs, technocrats and professionals. Roundtable India under Freedom Through Education has built more than 7,000 classrooms in 3,000 plus projects impacting approximately 8 million children. That's very impressive. I request the Roundtable members here to please come forward and welcome Shakti ji. I know there are others who are watching this online, but we can only have a few people here who can welcome. Thank you everyone.
Thank you very much.
I request Shri Shakti Sinha ji to please come forward and give his address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, namaste to everybody. One does not do, rarely does events with people in the room. We are used to speaking now in front of a camera or in front of our phones. I feel very happy to be here. But because the title given to me is Leadership Lessons from Vajpayee, I'll first start with the leadership lessons only, and then we'll go to Vajpayee. Because Rashtra also dedicated to leadership, all this thing also done. If you have to name an Indian leader, no, not okay, with which Indian leader would you associate the word cooperative group housing society? An Indian leader who conceived of this idea, as India is urbanizing, space is a premium. Absolutely. How many people would associate that today? The point, and I'm also plugging my book on Sardar Patel, which is outside, but then beside the point. You know, how many people knew that Sardar Patel spent 10 years in Ahmedabad municipality, first as the sanitation committee chairman and then as the municipality. And his massive grasp of public administration, which India was fortunate to have from 47 onwards, would not have been possible but for that grassroots experience. So leadership is such a thing that you really can't say because of this person is a leader. What is a leader? Leader need not always be in front. Leader can be in between, can be even behind at times to prevent people falling off. Leadership at the front has advantages. You can rally people. Has disadvantages that sometimes if you're too far ahead of the crowd will disperse. To get a balance is very important. And the first lesson from Mr. Vajpayee that is there in this book, he was actually the first non-Congress Prime Minister of India. Maraji was technically the first non-Congress, but Maraji decided to spend his entire life in the Congress party. Chaudhry Charan Singh spent a long time in the Congress party. Chandrasekhar, VP Singh, essentially congressmen all their lives. Mr. Vajpayee was the first Prime Minister never to have been in the Congress party. And the BJP, which was founded in 1980, after it ran into troubles in 1984 onwards, Mr. Vajpayee was technically on the side for a very long time. And the BJP grew tremendously in that period. But by mid-1990s, it was clear that the BJP had reached a plateau. That if the BJP had to move ahead, it would need a person who could draw support beyond the base. To win elections in this country, like in most countries, if you're relying only on your base, very difficult to win elections. Maybe once you can win it, not a second time. Because you ultimately need to get the non-committed. The people committed to X party, people to Y party. There are many in-betweens who choose in each elections. Actually, up to 1/3 of Indian voters decide to vote who 1 or 2 days before the elections only. How do you get them over? And Mr. Vajpayee was brought in to do that, which he did. 96, he formed the government, which didn't last. But between 96, when they formed the government, didn't last, and 1998, when they formed the government properly. In that period, the number of parties which supported came together to form the NDA, kept going up. At some stage, it is 22, 23. Now, for a leader to manage 22, 23 parties, and if I give you, which I described in the book, at the time of government formation, at the time of portfolio distribution, and subsequently. Now, in Bihar, as an example, Nitish Kumar wanted the Lalu Rabde government dismissed. In Bengal, Mamata wanted the CPM government dismissed. In Odisha, Naveen Patnaik wanted the Congress government dismissed. And the most difficult was Jayalalitha wanting the DMK government dismissed in Tamil Nadu. And not one of those governments were dismissed. So, the first point of leadership was that Mr. Vajpayee was able to bring this disparate group together and hold them together. Of course, there will always be a couple of drop-offs, a couple of people joining in. Mr. Chautala announced his withdrawal support, but he said on the conference motion, we will vote for you also. What is a strange game? Therefore, to be able to manage contradictions, very, very important lesson from Mr. Vajpayee. The second very major lesson again. Now, India realized after the Chinese test of 1964, the Chinese nuclear test of 1964, that India would have to neutralize. And actually, we don't give credit, it was Pandit Nehru in the 50s set up the Atomic Energy Commission. We set up those Tarapur and which is the other place in Mumbai, Bombay. We set them up nuclear plants. We moved ahead. 62, we were on the verge of testing. We were fairly close to being testing. Chinese defeat of the Chinese gave us a bit of a shock. Then Pandit Nehru's health deteriorated. And after the stroke at Bhubaneswar, he was ineffective as a leader. India could not test. Subsequently, India was not in a position to test. We were afraid of the world. 74, Mrs. Gandhi tested. Pokhran 1, Buddha smiling. But then the panic that if the world hits us with sanctions, Indian economy was already in doldrums, in a terrible situation. So we called it PNE, peaceful nuclear explosion. The English word called an oxymoron. So And subsequently, every government wanted, other than Morarji government, wanted to test but could not test. Narasimha came close to testing in November of 1995. The Americans told him, we can't stop you testing, but the consequences are yours. Backed out. And therefore, Mr. Narasimha actually told Mr. Vajpayee after he became president short period, this is the chance. Of course, that was not the chance then. It came subsequently. To cross the nuclear Rubicon was a tremendously courageous decision. Very important for Indian security, very, very important. It had to be done. But you faced the world at its angriest moment. It was not just economic sanctions, which were difficult, of course. World Bank funding stopped, especially the cheaper arm of the World Bank called the IDA, International Development Assistance, stopped. The Japanese were then giving us $1 billion. $1 billion in 98 for India is like $30–40 billion today in terms of the economic impact. Tremendous impact, stopping. The political violence against India, not stones, but political. You see the language used against us by everybody. This is, I think, the Australian Labour in the opposition foreign policy statement, she called it an act of nuclear bastarding. The Canadians said this is a Hindu party, but they added doing what they said they would do. I mean, for a politician to be pulled up for doing what he said he should do, it's ironical, but that is life. It took us a long time. It took us 1 year Kargil war to actually recover from the sanctions. I mean, no, the door started opening at Kargil. It took recovery took another 2 years after that. Just so different. Strong years. And yet that line had to be crossed. That decision to cross, absolutely vital for India. To do it, I think Mr. Vajpayee deserves full credit. Today we assume these things. 98 was a different world. It was very weak India. Economically, we were in trouble after the Asian crisis of 97. We were wobbling. The rupee was under pressure. Public finances were in disarray. And yet, you know that the window to test was very short. Had you delayed, possibly you would not have tested. Mr. Vajpayee, like other prime ministers, would not have been able to test. Had he not tested right in the beginning, we would be assessing it. Then the third step after that, and which is why my book is called, it looks very grand, the title, The Years That Changed India. After all, India doesn't change so easily. But because of these 5 lessons that I shall have talked about, they're all momentous decisions who today we take for granted. But in the circumstances of the day, again, really amazing. The third step was an equal audacious one. America was most upset. Clinton had planned a visit, cancelled. Clinton went to China at the end of May, maybe 3 weeks after the test, and basically told China that you handle South Asia now. You become the arbiter between India and Pakistan. And can you think of anything more irrational than China being a mediator in South Asia between India and Pakistan? But that was your position, and you were forced to listen to all this. But some voices in America started speaking up, we should appreciate. And Mr. Vajpayee wrote a letter to Clinton and to British Prime Minister, the French President, and the Russian President, saying that China is in occupation of 50,000 square kilometers of Indian territory. China and Pakistan have a deep nuclear and missile cooperation going on for decades. Those relations with China are on the mend. This is the environment under which we are tested. In other words, Indian test is not against Pakistan. So people in America, some of them, the conservative voices particularly, but then from the speaker, Newt Gingrich and others, started saying, no, there is something in the Indian thing, we must understand it. And so then for Mr. Vajpayee to reach out to America and initiate the Stroke-Talbot responsing series of talks, quiet talks, to try to push. We were clear, we will not roll back the program. We have already frozen the program, we have now said we will not, Americans said roll back first, we said we will not roll back. To then begin talking was again an act of courage. And then we went to the United Nations, the annual general meeting of the General Assembly in September. And then at Asia House, not Asia House, Asia Society, Mr. Vajpayee in a speech went through the history of India-US relations, saying that so many moments we came close to each other and then did not fructify. Let us move ahead and this time join hands. And then he used the expression, which has finally been catching on today. He says, US and India are natural allies. The word ally has never been used in Indian diplomacy. At the height of the Cold War, We said we were neutral. We said we were non-aligned, not neutral. Non-aligned between the two blocks. Bangladesh time we had no option. We signed. Mrs. Gandhi was realistic enough to sign a treaty of friendship and cooperation with the Russians, with the Soviet Union, and yet we maintained the facade of being non-aligned. When you clearly said we are with the Russians, so we did not condemn the Afghanistan occupation by the Soviet Union. And we lost a lot of friends in Afghanistan even today because of that. Mr. Vajpayee said ally. Subsequent prime ministers, I think till recently, have not used the word ally ever again. Very strong word, by Indian standard, not in the world. To do that, and to do that at a time when USA is officially targeting you. Because he was seeing the long-term rise of China, seeing the world change, seeing that the Cold War is over. There is one superpower. One. It's a unipolar world. Do I live in the past, or do I look for a future that is good to me? And to look for the future, which today, after 2 decades, is coming out to be true. That is leadership. It's not a tuka, sometimes tukas work, to win a bet of 100 million, 1 in 10 million. But that's a fluke. This is not fluke. This is a deeply held awareness based on 50 years of political life, based on understanding the national order, and yet taking that leap of faith. You need to take a leap of faith. You need to plunge into the darkness. That was the third very important lesson. And even as he reached out to Pakistan, to United States, he also reached out to Pakistan. Now that you have tested and we have tested, can we get on with life? And the meeting with Nawaz Sharif took place in the SARC meeting in Colombo, early August '98. Not a great meeting, but a starting point. Then the meeting took place in September end in New York, much better meeting, where it was discussed. Nawaz Sharif mentioned that 82 Asian Games में देखने आया था बीबी के साथ, अपने बेगम के साथ गाड़ी चला के लाहौर से. Why don't we encourage people to cross the borders of the land? And then the idea of a bust. Let's have a bust. So it was half serious, but just once he mentioned कि मुनाबाव से सिंध का बड़ा अच्छा ट्रेन का पहले रूट भी start कर दीजिए. But bus I get caught on. Yeah, it looks good. It's nothing great, but optics are good. And then to move on suddenly and push fast, starting with some lot of backstage diplomacy. Diplomacy is a terrible thing. People know in advance what is happening. The negotiation is about to fail. You have to work. You have to come to an understanding before the world even knows about it. Because always there are spoilers in the room. And just a quick example today is news leaked out that India has reached out to the Taliban. And then the next news came out that Foreign Minister Jaishankar has met the leadership of the Taliban, specifically Mullah Baradar. That means that from that date onwards, India and Taliban have stopped talking to each other. See, if you have two countries, the two sides, is known position, that's different. When it's exploring in the dark, you cannot have, life cannot be transparent. RTI does not apply. Otherwise, there would be no progress. So that quiet diplomacy worked. And Lahore, from being just starting of a bus, Mr. Vajpayee visit, he will go. Therefore, we realized that Delhi to Lahore he can't go. He'll do it from Amritsar airport, Varanasi to Lahore, to the border actually. Vajpayee from side come on the return bus. Fortunately, that didn't happen, not required. But it created such a good impact globally. Suddenly, India was seen as a mature nation. See, for the world, India and Pakistan are two rivals, equal rivals. We know differently, but they see it that way. Even today, many of them do see it. To then tell them, listen, we are neutral, but we're prepared, we are responsible, we want to talk to each other. We want to have good relations. That was an eye-opener for the world. And what we did not know, there was a massive backlash against it, but that would ultimately work in India's benefit. So what was the backlash against it? One is government fell in Delhi. Because fell by one vote, but it fell, nevertheless. Because I think had Mr. Vajpayee succeeded in 1999 with Pakistan, possibly his position in India would have become so strong politically, it would have been difficult to. Now, this is only, I'm talking in The word theory is considered a very bad word in India. Theory means kuch janta nahi hai. Theory actually means generalization of reality, of truth. That's theory. I would think that had he succeeded, happens if he had to be brought down. The greater backlash happened in Pakistan when the Pakistani army decided to sabotage this peace initiative by occupying the heights of Kargil. This was unprecedented. This was an act of war. Two nuclear armed neighbors going to war. So your reaction had to be very, very different. It was not a normal war. It was not 71, it was not 65. How do you take action against? Do you let the Pakistanis occupy your territory because you're afraid of war? Because wars can be started like riding on the back of a tiger. You can't dismount a tiger. You can't decide when the war will end. The World War I, which lasted for 4 years, 3 weeks people thought, okay, now the war is about to end. Celebration started. 3 weeks. It lasted another 4 years. So you had to be very careful what you did. But could you let Pakistan occupy your heights? And could you let Pakistan threaten the only road to Ladakh? The road from Srinagar to Kargil to Ladakh. That road had to be protected. So the Pakistanis had to be thrown out. So the decision was very clear. We shall throw out every Pakistani intruder. And initially the impression was that the Mujahideen. Though many of us felt that Mujahideen don't occupy territory. They create an incident, a violent incident, and run away. Mujahideen don't fight peace battles. Of the thousands of Americans who died in Afghanistan against the Taliban, most died due to IED explosions. They don't die in battle. The terrorist organizations don't fight wars. Not conventional war. There was a different. There was asymmetrical war. Occupied territory. Later we found out it was the Pakistani army. So we shall eject every one of them out. We shall use all the three arms of the defense forces. The Air Force, which was used in 65 and 71, not used in 62. The Navy, which was slightly used in 71. The famous attack on Karachi port and some bombings in East Bengal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, not much. This time the Navy was used to literally blockade Karachi port. The Air Force was used extensively, and the Army, of course, took the brunt of the fighting. But, and this is a big caveat which many military complain even today, which is that why did you not allow us to cross the LOC? The answer was very clear. This was not a normal war. You have two nuclear armed neighbors. Crossing the LOC indirectly is another matter by plane at that speed, but not consciously. The world should see India differently. We will not allow this localized war to become a configuration, but that could mean a world war at the end of the day. You could not allow that to happen. You could not attack Pakistan in Rajasthan, in Punjab, or even in Kashmir. It had to be just that sector. Many people complain that with that, India lost people. The reality is exactly the opposite. The war started in May. By mid-June, the world had ganged up against Pakistan. For the first time, and this was 50 years of independence, 52 years, the world was with India and not with Pakistan. In the 71 war, when we were fighting to liberate Bangladesh, because 3 million people died in Bangladesh, and because there were 10 million refugees in India, the UN General Assembly voted 104 to 11 for a ceasefire. 11 was Soviet Union, its friends in the Eastern Bloc, Bhutan. That is it. Not one non-aligned country voted for India. They all voted to stop the war. Had we stopped the war, there would have been no Bangladesh, the killings would have continued. This time the world was with us for the first time. And the Americans then told the Clintons, summoned Nawaz Sharif, 4th of July, Americans have a holiday. You do it in America, 4th of July, nobody can work. Everybody's out there with their families watching the fireworks. Clinton told Nawaz Sharif, we have two statements. One where you agree to a withdrawal, other where you don't and all hell breaks loose. And the war stopped after that. So not crossing the LOC actually reduced the time of the war. The army had told us, and it's not a secret, in end of June that they require another 3 months to end the war. The war ended in 2 weeks. So did we lose more lives or did we save lives? My argument is we save lives. Sometimes acting responsibly, looking like limited action is actually more effective than a bravado, an act of, bravura. These 5 lessons actually, and though I was commissioned by Pellegrini to write this book in 65,000 words, the more I remembered and the more I worked, the book getting bigger and bigger. It's about 1,10,000 words, but touch wood. Most people who have read it have liked it. I hate saying these things, but the reality is that a lot of people have liked. So the other lesson is, as I said, I start with Sardar Patel and end with Sardar Patel. I mean, Sardar Patel, again, I can give a full lecture of Sardar Patel some other day. If you look at his abilities to understand the situation, where what works, where what doesn't work, where to apply what, whether it's Kheda, Borsad, his own hometown, or Bardoli. Different tactics being used. Learning from the past, seeing the issues as different. Whether it is setting up Amul as a cooperative, because Paulson's factory in Bombay is to come and buy milk at very low prices. Obviously, I'm not saying Paulson was wrong. If we form our own cooperative and do it ourselves, we'll save the margins. Right? Person who said that the labor, Ahmedabad Textiles, yes, labor must be treated well, but labor and industrial relationship must be made easier through mediation, not through the law. Because at the end of the day, you require the industrialist to have investable surpluses, because India needs investment to grow. Now, talking about investments in the 30s, we didn't talk investment in the 30s. India needs investment from the private sector. And therefore, in independent India, he said nuclear energy, defense, arms and ammunition, and one more. That only will be government monopolies, others private sectors mostly. After that, the situation changed. The fact is, to understand that, to set up the agricultural university, annual university in Gujarat. I mean, these are aspects of Patel was bothered about. On the fact that the fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution, particularly the rights of the minorities in Article 29 and 30, flow from the committee headed by Sardar Patel. Or he's known as setting up the civil services. Today he can be blamed partly for it. But in the context of the 40s, you're trying to merge 550 states. There's massive violence in the country. Millions plus have died. Pakistan has fought a war against you in Kashmir, and you're bankrupt. At that stage, he realized that it was the bureaucracy who fought in Ahmedabad municipality, which actually, and he told the Constituent Assembly, these are professionals. It's up to you to use them or not to use them. If you don't like them, he said, I will go with them. He said, if India is stable because of that. So the ability to, again, say what I was Vajpayee in the beginning, and the ability to judge the situation and be able to look 2 steps, 3 steps ahead. Maybe not 20 years ahead, but a couple of steps ahead. But if you react to a situation to solve that problem, be sure it creates some other problems somewhere else. As agriculture policies, which worked beautifully for us in the 70s, when we were food deficient, food grain deficient, are embarrassing today because you're sitting on millions and millions of tons of food grains and protecting them abroad. If you're not able to change your policies on time, that's when leadership fails. And that is the lesson I got from both working with Mr. Vajpayee, knowing him closely, and reading about him and studying his actions, as I do about Sardar Patel. That ability of leadership, to be able to judge a situation, looking ahead, and to carry people with you. You fail, many times you fail, many times you succeed. And it's the successes for which you really must learn this as well. So thank you very, very much. I normally speak for 30 minutes.
That's great. We can have some questions.
Please, that is the whole idea. Otherwise, I can go on for 1 hour. I need to speak for 1 hour, but I thought it's unfair. I told you before that, sales pitch. Management has agreed to sell this, the lying outside at 40% discount. This book is only 360 rupees. Kilo ke hisaab se bhi loge. The other book, Sardar Patel, is actually again, I've been an editor only, I've written only 1 chapter of it. I'm not praising because I'm involved in it. If you look at the aspects of Patel's life, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, Sage is not such a good marketing people. and the book is highly priced. So they have agreed to give some discounts, but the book is now 760 outside. So I hope that I won't have to carry back 20 books. I brought 15 and 5. So I hope some of it will go. Yes, please.
So, you have a unique skill set and your experience is, it's a unique experience in the sense that you had a bird's eye view of running a country. So I'm very interested in your analysis of the current government.
See, my BA and MA is in history. In 1971, Henry Kissinger, a famous visit to China, very, very famous visit, and he was talking to Zhou Enlai. Of course, it's slightly wrong, but the story as it is told is he asked, what do you think about the French Revolution, 1789? And Zhou Enlai said, it's too early to tell. In 1971. Actually, he was talking about the 1968 happenings in France. But even so, it's too early to tell. Okay. Some very, very strong things in terms of the ability to break molds, and especially in the social sector. I'll just take a scheme like Ujjwala. Indoor air pollution was the second large cause of death for women under 50 in Uttar Pradesh. Girls spend the entire day helping their mothers gather wood and gather water. Ujjwala has made a tremendous difference. Or the rural electrification, where if you have one light in the evening, that family's social and economic status go up. These are very small things, Swachh Bharat, which hasn't done so well, but it yield results much slower. But again, open defecation is one of the reasons this country has malnutrition of people in the top 20% of the income group. Nowhere in the world do you find malnourished people at the top end of the income stream. Why? Because it's in the air and we are imbibing it. Nothing prevents me. Of course, this is a tremendous cost to the poor, the stunting and all. Now, these are all things which don't get the kind of attention we do because we are a politics-obsessed country. Because of my work in international affairs, I realized that people condemn Sri Lanka for its China debt. And I said, have you noticed Sri Lanka's debt profile? Or Sri Lanka's exposed to GDP? They said, no. I said, what options does Sri Lanka have? Because we are so politics obsessed, we only look at the political aspects of the government, which in many ways, as somebody who worked with Mr. Vajpayee, he would not let one day pass literally without remembering that damn thing has to go. In effect, it went. Legally, it is there as a part of the Constitution, but it has been used to basically do what it is meant to do, which allows sections of the Constitution. It has now allowed all the Constitution to operate. Right? These are very, very easy. But this is an Indian churn also. This is an Indian tremendous amount of churn. And polarization is very, very strong. I recently did a study as part of another project on communal violence in India. Last few years, 5 to 6 years, have been the lowest in Indian history, communal violence, in terms of deaths, in terms of injuries. Would you know that if you read the papers? No, no. Look at the Pew survey to actually understand what India is, right? So that's why I said it's too early to judge in the sense that impact of many other policies take much longer than there are certain things definitely, if population policy, let me assure you, is a bad thing to do. It never work. China will get old before it becomes rich because forced populations tend to start tapering off with women's literacy, access to health services, and per capita, all three. Other than now 3 or 4 Indian states, most Indian states have already reached replacement levels. In that sense, So there are many things which has to be better understood. You mobilize a lot of people. The old structure is breaking down. The new structure takes time to come up. So in between looks very chaotic. And as Manmohan Singh said, history will judge me better. So history is actually the best judge.
Thank you, sir. So
I want.
Please.
You told
I have
us-
slotted 1 hour for you.
Yeah.
What time?
You told us a lot of acts and actions of Vajpayee. Can we know what was the vision of Vajpayee for India or the world? So he was a visionary, what we know. So let us focus on that point.
Good point. Actually, he didn't articulate a conscious, some people like Nehru were very clear in what they were articulating. People like Vajpayee were not very articulate on giving a larger picture all the time. But through their actions and through the specific statements on issues, one, of course, he was clear, like many people, that India is destined to rise. India is destined to be a world power. And not a world power in terms of military might. Of course, you need minimum military strength. I don't think any two people can disagree with that. It's military. But the fact that this world civilization needs its place in the sun, but not as a hegemon. So that was very clear. He was committed to peace. For him, you wanted nuclear parity with China to defend yourself. That's why the first thing he did was no more testing, and we will not use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear powers. So the idea was very clear. Our nuclear weapons are for defense, for safety of the country. But he was a very strong nationalist. The author title of this book given by Penguin was "Is Something Nationalist." That's a name that looks too aggressive, and I wanted it more in sense of the ability to change the situation, And if you look at all these steps that I mentioned, the ability to bring people together, to govern India from the middle as much as possible. And yet, in a in a speech at Talkatoora Guard Stadium in 1999 February, Sonia Gandhi called Mr. Vajpayee Maut ka Saudagar. Read the book, it's there. I've cited that evidence. So the element of polarization in the society has already become, politics has become very strong by then. It's much stronger now, it's already very strong there. Jyoti Basu called it uncivilized. Everyone who abused Vajpayee in those days and today is remembering what a great man he was. Just remember you when you were abusing it. So his idea of India was definitely, the Hindu ethos of India was very clear in him. But as he told the BJP MPs in 98 when he came to power, he says he can't think of an India without Muslims in it. So he saw Hindus and Muslims living together as part of the Indian ethos, which is what the Pew survey also says. That to more than 80% of Indians, respect for the other religion is one of the core elements of their religion. So that kind of syncretic view was very, very strong. But he was not embarrassed about being a Hindu. I mean, the people who come and say, I'm not a practicing Hindu. He said, no, they're going to be practicing Hindu. We don't have rules laid down for religious behavior. And that's why he didn't like the word religion he used. The word he used always was Upasana Paddhati. He says, Apna Upasana Paddhati, that's your problem, not my problem. And but India and the world, India and Asia, very much. And a hope that India and China can work together. His outreach to America was basically to see that at the end of the day, China, which is growing, and China's economy was 20% of what it is now at that stage, possibly smaller than that. They were slightly better than us, that's all. Our GDPs were more or less on par at that time. Today's 5 times bigger. That India and China must work together. Otherwise, the feeling that other forces will take advantage of it. And therefore, he wanted China, so he made an extra attempt to be good to China without conceding too much. That kind of vision. So he did not really, of course, in India, free of poverty, and India where every woman could live a life of dignity. Absolutely. All that at different times he has expressed it. But I agree, in the sense that my frustration is that, your question is that he never really sat down to articulate it. Once he did write a 40-page essay by hand for somebody at my property. It's in a book called Nambure, where you can see a lot of it. He describes the literature that he loves. From that you can understand his world. From Big Nani, Subhadra Kumari Chauhan, again. So again a very broad view, but the fact that Indianness was so important to him. Right?
Excuse me.
Yes.
So this is Mohit Gupta from Roundtable Organization.
Roundtable to dikh raha hai.
Sir, we are also leaders in our organization and our business profiles. There are many times as a leader I see that I am taking some kind of a decision and I fail. The result is not what I expected. And because of that, many a times I am not taking much more decisions that I may fail. So I have quite a few regrets which are keeping up. So how to handle such regrets as a leader? And were there any such regrets for Mr. Vajpayee as well?
I'm sure.
As he was.
I'm sure, many. But the point was, don't live in the past. For any leader, to drive, right? Indians, we don't use the side view mirrors. The side view mirror and this mirror are very important for driving, to keep you safe. But you can't drive looking at them, right? So you need them. You need the lessons of the past, but don't get bogged down in the past. And I must say, not just Mr. Vajpayee, most politicians, I can tell you that, huh? They're very good at, so kal gali dega, see, they don't let the past pull them down. And I think for all of us as individuals, you have to live in the present and work for the future. Don't live in the future. You have to live right now, here. But if you don't absorb the right lessons from the past, and you're not living in the moment, then your future is not going to be very easy also. You'll make more mistakes. Mistakes must be analyzed, learned lessons, and then, you know, when the BJP had 2 MPs in 1984, what could we do? Or when trying to form a government in 98, the then President K.R. Narayan kept changing the rules of the game. Each time we came near the goalpost would move away 20 feet, 50 feet. And I describe it. Then Narayan went beyond the constitution, beyond traditions, beyond everything. Precedents. So it could be very frustrating, but then you learn that, do I let that paralyze me? Or do I learn to, if I have to cross the wall, do I look for a door? Or do I look to try to break my head in? You may have to jump over the wall, dig a tunnel, right? Or simply find a door. There's no answer to it. You have to find your own each time.
So basically constant will to learn and to improve or improvise. Thank you.
Be a student all your life.
Yes.
The moment people say, and a lot of people, my friends say, I'm a scholar of such and such, I say, oh my God. How do you call yourself a scholar? Call yourself a student.
Lifelong learner.
The moment you decide you know, I think hubris starts and your mind goes for a toss.
I have a question. So, when you were answering the question of the model, so you mentioned China and India were GDP and the growth were slightly somewhat near around.
They were catching up with us at that stage.
Right.
They had caught up by 98, they caught up by 94, 95.
And now we know the difference and we know the
Tremendous asymmetry.
And fortunately, 2010, I was in Indian embassy in Shanghai as an official interpreter. I speak Chinese language. Consulate general, yeah. Then Srimati Reva Kamali Das was consulate general.
Acha, you all there.
So I have served under her for 1 year. So now you see the difference between India and China. Will India ever be able to reach that? Because I have seen China for 3 years there. China is, I can say, far away from India. Will India ever be able to reach? Because my question comes from, now we're building highways, but within a month, those highways are waterlogging. What's the point?
You still need the highways. I know you should not be waterlogged, you still need the highways. See, there are no easy answers to it for the simple reason that never make a prediction. The American joke is attributed to that famous baseball player, never make a prediction, especially about the future. You know? So,
that's like living reality.
Yeah, but the fact is, on many facts, you have to judge successes by different parameters. There's no one single fix. GDP is not the only fix to it. Right? So on many factors, you can do well. I would wonder actually with the kind of resource intensity of growth of China. Can India afford that kind of resource intensity? Let me assure you, if the country will become unlivable, if that kind of resource intensity of growth is there. China itself is facing serious environmental problems precisely because of that, you know.
Yes.
Remember, they had to redo the entire heating of the city of Beijing for the Olympics. Because Beijing was unlivable. You could not see anything in Beijing. In full 40-mile ring, every single house had to change its heating system. to move away from coal into electricity. So it's a steep price to pay. It's a very, very steep price to pay. Growth. Can we manage it better? I really don't know. I wish, I hope so. I hope if you teach them the right Bharatiya ethos, which is about living with nature and not conquering nature, we are better off. Because again, you have to think through. Dam you require, yes, definitely you require dams. But you kill the river to get the dam. Why is India and Sri Lanka having a permanent fight over fishing rights in the Gulf of Mannar? Because the Kaveri is dead. So there's no fresh water going into the sea. Salinity has gone up. There are no fish on the Indian waters. That's all. So this law of unintended consequences in nature is so strong that if we make the same mistakes as the Chinese, it will be very difficult for us. So I hope we learn from the West, we learn from China, but do it in the local context.
Yeah.
What we can really learn from China is government accountability.
Yes.
You cannot have a teacher absent in a school of China, not because of the Communist Party. People will not accept it. And the Communist Party secretary will then be questioned. Why is there growth in Chinese cities? Each mayor is judged on the ability to generate growth. Their parameters are very, very clear. So we can learn not from China, but not all of it. Yes, please. I was hoping Rishi would say we could bolega.
My name is Saurabh, actually working in Rashtra. So I wanted to ask, we all know that Vajpayee was a close follower of Shama Prasad Mukherjee. So do you find any kind of similarity between both of them in terms of?
He was not a follower as much, when the Jansanghh was formed. See, Shama Prasad Mukherjee broke away from the Hindu Mahasabha, from Savarkar. And the RSS also, after his being banned after Gandhi's assassination, realized they needed a political platform. So the two came together to form the Jansanghh, and Mr. Vajpayee was seconded from the RSS to the Jansanghh, and he was attached to Shama Prasad Mukherjee as a very young man himself. And they worked together for a very short while, 2 years or so. But Mr. Vajpayee learned a lot and was very grateful to Shama Prasad Mukherjee. And part of his anger at 370 stemmed from the death of Shama Prasad Mukherjee. He felt it was absolutely, he didn't say it was murder in that sense, but he was condemned only because of it. And therefore his fight was the right fight. That one nation, one flag, one constitution, basically. Hindi mein bada acha line tha Jammu Praja Parishad ka. Ek nidhan, ek nishan, ek nidhan, something like that. So that really effectively impressed him a lot. Yes, as a nation that is there. So the impact of Mukherjee otherwise was not so much, because obviously Mr. Vajpayee already in 47, 15 August wrote a poem saying this is not independence, this is darkness. With a partition, that the country has been torn. What kind of freedom is this? So he had formed the views already. So I guess he has come naturally jet. He was his boss at the end of the day. So yeah, he definitely learned a lot. That the Kashmir point he learned from him. Then Shama Prasad Mukherjee told him at the border, if Vajpayee go back and keep the flag flying.
I want to know about your personal relation that you shared with Vajpayee, because I've not met any person who has worked with a person of that stature. So what's the difficulty of working with someone like him?
One, of course, Vajpayee was very difficult to work with in one sense, because he's a man of few words, so contrary to popular impression. Extremely shy and introverted in the private gathering, and comfortable only with a few people in that sense. Speak well, speak comfortably. Just one thing, his vehicle with Appa Ghatate and others, and other political leaders, and therefore he's not very communicative. But then I learned that because he wants you to take the initiative. When I finally slowly started understanding it, basically his idea, so in a meeting like he was taking, Shakti is there, John Shakti is there. When everybody opens his mouth, he's happy to listen to him. Hierarchy consciously to bolne wale. So very open to ideas. Took his time on making a decision, but considered every point of view very, very carefully. And I learned from him the use of being very precise in language. His pauses in speeches were not dramatic so much as to find the right word. Nothing I say should be understood in a meaning that I don't want to be understood. Unless I myself want to be ambiguous. See, please remember, he was a politician at the end of the day. So I learned initially it was difficult to work with him, but he was not a hard taskmaster in the sense of group A type A. Leadership? No, not at all. Not at all. Speech he gave to everybody to function. An ability to listen and listen and listen. And then mull it over and then explain. Sometimes just, acha, theek hai, that's it. Second is over. You need no more persuasion. Can we move on to the next? This is what finally happened when you had to adapt the Patents Act of the WTO ruling. So cabinet pressed twice and argued for hours and hours. For against. Finally heard it, such a take it over. That's it, no more discussion. So sometimes leader also has to apply the time guillotine. Thus far and no further. Because ultimately, leadership is about taking decisions or knowing when not to take a decision. That's also important. Being decisive does not mean rushing to a decision. Being decisive means knowing when to take what decision. So personally, yes, that was. But then we developed a rapport, then I could chat also, but it took some time.
So what would be the one thing you will suggest or suggest to change to the current leadership of the country?
For that, I'll charge you 50,000 rupees. I work as a consultant in my party.
So if that can save India, why not?
Something makes it worse. See, your question. Never go for easy answers. Ek simple solution de do. Sometimes industry works, most often it does not work. Because, as I said, the law of unintended consequences. See, things have their own momentum. If you ignore that momentum and you think I've sorted it out, you've possibly created a bigger crisis somewhere else.
So on a bigger aspect, like not just one like.
No, I really do. I'm being very frank with you. No, I can't tell you one thing. I'll have probably write at least 20 pages, 30 pages. Because something to done in education, on health. Health, you must promote preventive health. You know? The fact that India produces more doctors and nurses is a terrible thing. All over the world, you produce more nurses than doctors. All over the world, the emergency room nurses are paid as much as the doctors. Would you do that in India? No. There's a pandemic. So there's so much to change. Education system. I mean, if half the children in class 5 can't read a class 3 textbook or do simple 5+4, that's serious. So that's what I'm saying. Don't look for one answer. I know army rule won't help. Let me assure you. Look at Pakistan and find out why army rule can be make the best of armies into corrupt institutions. You know. Yes, sir.
Sir, you've seen Vajpayee as a prime minister. How did you evaluate, if I may use the term, was he amenable to translating his party's ideology to policy?
Very good question. He was specifically asked this in Parliament. Why have you given up on the Uniform Civil Code, Article 370, and Ram Janmabhoomi Ayodhya thing, when you formed the government of 1998? So those things did not figure in the agenda of governance. And he said, because I don't have the numbers. So I got 160 MPs out of 540. And limitations of what I can do as a party person, you know. So he can be faulted for it, yes. The purest will fault him. And I would partly agree in the sense that, in retrospect, of course, I have the benefit of 20 years of time. He didn't have at that moment. Then I guess at certain moments, political parties have to bite the bullet, have to prepare to give up power. He also gave up power. Had he conceded to Jayalalitha, his government would have lasted in 99 when it failed. He also drew the line at that moment. There's no doubt that he did draw the line, which again was a sign of strength. But at times, yes, he can be faulted for being accommodative. But then if you're 160 in a house of 540, your ability to bargain with the others is substantially weaker. When you have to bargain not with 2 people, not with 3, but with 15 other people who are working at cross purposes. So then coalition management becomes a bigger problem than pushing your agenda. So in retrospect, yes, he was constrained by circumstances. Possibly he could have been more aggressive. Possibly. But would that aggression have put him to where he was? I don't know. So it's a, I can't give you a clear answer. I can't give you a clear answer.
Thank you.
Are you all tired? I'm not.
You're enjoying this?
I enjoyed. I enjoy being questioned. I enjoy being grilled. The ladies have said nothing. And I believe in gender equity. In my institution, till now, we've had in our webinars about 12 speakers, 9 of whom have been women. It's not coincidental.
So do you chant some poems of Atal Bihari Vajpayee? Do you like?
Okay.
I think a bit of influence of Vajpayee on Modi and that famous interaction on after the riots. And
I was in America doing this. They came from 2 very different backgrounds. Mr. Vajpayee was essentially started life at the top in that sense, because seconded to the Jansang, 1957 becomes MP, leader of the Jansang in Parliament at a young age of 34, and since then remained at the top of Indian politics. Well, an option otherwise, he was always noted as a noted parliamentarian, noted leader. Modi came up the other way around. Both started Swayamsevaks, but Modi remained a Prachalak for a very long time. Then worked in the party, first in Gujarat, then after Gujarat tensions between Chinmay Patel and Waghela, part of the deal, Mr. Modi was moved out to Himachal, rebuilt the party in Himachal, brought it to power. Different generation, different experiences of seeing an India of 40s and 50s and early 60s, and seeing of India in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The worldview was quite different in that sense. The worldview was quite different. But yet, on 370, both had the same point of view. On beef, they had the same point of view in one sense. Yes, it is something, for cows, something very important to most of the country, and therefore, don't flaunt it. Okay, I'm not stopping you eating it, but don't flaunt it. In that sense, how do you manage to keep the country together? So they had these points. Mr. Vajpayee did feel, after what I read, I wasn't there, that he wanted a change in Gujarat. Rajadharam karna chahiye, and Mr. Modi said, Rajadharam kar hi rahe. And the party at that moment supported Mr. Modi. And Mr. Vajpayee, despite being the Prime Minister, had visited the party, the famous meeting in Goa. So it's complex, and that's what makes politics very interesting. The people have the assumptions about these monolithic political parties. Neither the Chinese Communist Party, not a monolith either. Neither are parties, they're not monoliths. Despite the best efforts of Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi, they're still unable to put Sidhu or anything for the last year and a half, right? I mean, political parties have their own logic. It's an outside is difficult to understand. But you can't be leader of your party if you're, as I said at the beginning, a leader should not be so far ahead of the party that the party deserts the leader. That happens. Parties are known to desert their leaders like this. When you're no more useful to the party, and it's a long ride into the sunset. But rather than that, I'm not saying anything more. I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. I wasn't there. I've been asked to write on Mr. Vajpayee's full tenure by Penguin. I don't have energy for it. That requires a lot. I mean, this is effectively, 80% of the book is 1.5 years. So if there are no more questions, Sahil, thank you for the Thank you. Before you say a vote of thanks, let me first say thank you very much for the invitation. And I was very clear and agreed with him. It's physical करेंगे. Zoom तो हम रोज करते हैं. In fact, I was Zoom call it for 8 o'clock also. Then I do it the way back to
We
Delhi.
planned this for exactly 3 months over 17th April, but then the second wave hit and we decided we'll postpone this.
But then करेंगे तो physical करेंगे. But I wanted to see this place also. Very blessed. Very blessed. My congratulations to all of you. Remarkable place. And I hope to come back to see students fit in the halls. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for such an elaborate and engrossing session. And I must say that questions asked by the participants was also, they were quite inquisitive, and we could unearth a lot more information from Mr. Sinha.
Read the book.
So we actually tried and disinter more information from you than you would have actually envisaged doing in the session. So it was quite a lovely session, and thanks for the participation. But as all good things come to an end, I would like to just say that we have come to the end of this session. I would like to thank Shobhiji, who helped us in the proper conduction of this session. People who have gathered from various places to have come here and the way they participated. And last but not the least, the team of Roundtable and all of you who are present there and many more who are watching us online today. Thank you very much for your participation. And the way it was conducted was very enthralling. I must say, I learned a lot from listening to him. I'm sure it must be the case with very many people who were particularly growing up during that time when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of India. So, thank you all for participating. We come to the end of it. A very good evening, good night, whatever you want to say. And thank you all for participating. And we'll try and converge once again when we conduct something like this. Thank you. Thank you. So we have